Okay, so welcome to this lesson class topic on transforming triggers. This class is again another one of my favorite topics, and it's part of the co-regulation module because it's also about us as parents and what we're bringing to the table when it comes to parenting. So we're very still much focused on ourselves, and then as we go into the next module, which will be the week after next, we will be focusing more on, on more of our kids rather than ourselves. So let me just share a little bit about what we're going to be covering today as I share my screen. Everybody see that okay? Yeah, okay. So just before I hit record, as a group, we were talking about what we're going to be talking about what triggers are, but we were talking about that, that times when I'm just going to let Carolyn, those times when it feels like our children are pushing all of our buttons. We also discussed that it's not just our children sometimes that are pushing our buttons. It can be other people in our lives as well, but today we will be focusing on our children. Just bear with me. Oh, there, I'll just let her in. There you go. On the right button. I've got a lot of buttons open over my screen. Hopefully Carol should be with us too. Right. Are you there, Carol? Yeah.
Hi.
Hey. You're here. Amazing. Great. Okay, lovely. You haven't missed much. Oh, Carrie's here too. The camera's working. Yay. All right. So I was just talking about what this topic is all about, what this class is all about tonight. As normal, I'm going to be covering a bit of theory and a bit of information coming your way, and then hopefully there'll be some time left for a bit of discussion at the end. We started a little bit of a discussion, but I'd love to have that at the end like we did last time as well. Those of you watching on the replay, if you've got any questions or comments, or you want to have more of a discussion as well, then we can do that in the Facebook group, or we can do it in your one-to-ones. So this class is all about children, how our children push our buttons, and it really does explain how that happens and why it happens. And here's what you'll be able to do by the end of this topic. So by the end of this class and all of the supporting resources and materials and exercises, this is my goal and intention for you to be able to do. So we're going to go through what triggers are and where they come from. Okay, so a bit of a spoiler alert, they're not actually about your children. It's much more about you. We're going to talk about how to prevent, what your common triggers are. We're going to talk about how to prevent them, but we're also going to talk about how your thoughts might be fueling your triggers and how to reduce that and how to be more mindful of our thoughts when it comes to, having the ability to not let it bother us so much. So it's really about increasing our tolerance levels to our children's normal behavior. Okay, you're going to learn, I've got a 5-step framework and something called the trigger tracker, which I'm going to be introducing you to today to help you become more aware of your triggers, to help you become more aware of what's going on in your perception of your child's behaviors, and how to kind of, get better at reducing the volatility. I can't even say the word. Volatility, is that a word? The volatileness. Yeah, there you go. The ability for their behavior to make you erupt. There you go. That's a better way of saying it. Okay. I will be talking about the meditations and the mindfulness stuff as well. And there's no new regulation tool this week, but you're just going to be kind of focusing in on the ones that you've already learned and kind of integrating them into your life a little bit more. Okay, so I've tried to pick one quote about triggers to kind of get you into the mood and get you into like the thinking behind triggers, but I couldn't pick just one, so I've got 3 for you. So here's 3 quotes about triggers. So this one says, remember that you're not having a reaction because your child is behaving a certain way, okay? You're having a reaction because of what that behavior means to you. And that is triggered from your own past experiences. Okay. So again, this is just highlighting the fact that it's not actually usually about our child's behavior that's the problem. It's about how we are perceiving it. And it's about us and our beliefs and our thoughts and all of the stories that we have got about the certain behaviors that we're seeing. And this is not about feeling bad or guilty or judging yourself or any of those things, because a lot of these things are your default settings that you were programmed with as a child. This is about how you were parented, and what that is bringing to the table when you've got your child in front of you. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if that is making sense. Great. Okay. So here's another one of my favorite quotes. If you're triggered, have you heard of Gabor Mate? He's a really, really famous guy on trauma. It's a really interesting guy. He says, if you're triggered, okay, it's because you are a gun ready to fire. It's because there's explosive material in you that you've been carrying all your life. And the rich learning is in getting curious about your ammunition and what's inside. And that's what this topic is all about, getting really curious about what you're holding that is, giving the behavior that your child is doing the power over you to make you respond like that. Okay. And the last one is by a great, I love Dr. Laura Markham. She's probably one of the first parenting coaches I followed when my kids were small. And she says, whenever we get triggered, we've stumbled on something that needs healing, or it's an opportunity for us to be curious and see what's there that could do with a little bit of healing, a little bit of attention, about shining the light on it and dealing with that thing so that it doesn't become so emotionally charged, so then it doesn't bother us so much. So she says, anytime your child pushes your buttons, they're showing you an unresolved issue, potentially showing you, not always, but potentially showing you an unresolved issue from your own childhood. Okay, so it's quite a heavy topic, but it's a super interesting one. And this really is where we become more able to, be more aware of our stuff. So then we can, choose our responses rather than just kind of reacting from this kind of autopilot that we were programmed with. Okay, so let's dig into what an actual trigger is, an emotional trigger. Okay, so an emotional trigger is anything in your environment that's a stimulus, perhaps. Like it can be anything like a smell or a sound or a sight or a person talking in a certain way, any kind of situation, a topic. Obviously, when it comes to our kids, it's the way that they're behaving, it's the way they say no, it's the way they're crying. And what the stimulus does is it reminds us of a time when we felt unsafe ourselves, physically or emotionally, as a child. It's not within our control. Okay. It's a subconscious, automatic reaction and default response to protect you from what you perceive, or your brain perceives, or your nervous system perceives that is happening. So when you get triggered, your brain hijacks your conscious, rational upstairs brain and then reroutes it to the downstairs brain, resulting in the fight, flight, freeze response. Okay, now sometimes that can be like in an instant. Sometimes, you can tolerate something for a little bit or a long while, and then suddenly you blow. When you blow and you go, blah, does that happen to anyone? I call it the Hobbit moment. Does everyone watch The Hobbit where Bilbo Baggins, it's Gollum? I know it's Bilbo Baggins, isn't he? And he's like, he's fine, and then he goes, blah. I call it that moment, right? Everyone's experienced that moment, right? Is it just me? In that moment, you have been hijacked by your downstairs brain, okay? You've no longer got access to your rational thinking mind. And that's when we sometimes do stuff that we're not always proud of afterwards. That could be shouting, that could be, all sorts of things that we just, think, wish, oh God, I wish I hadn't done that afterwards. Okay, it's really important to remember this is a reaction to your past and not the present. The present is just the trigger for it, it's just the reminder of it. But what's actually happening is you are reacting from the past. And you usually know when you've been triggered or you've had one of these kind of Hobbit moments or Bilbo Baggins moments, because it's characterized by strong emotions or an overreaction or this kind of losing it kind of feeling where we're not in control. So hands up if you've ever felt that before. Yeah, great. All right. So wherever they come from, they're basically coming from any time, usually from your childhood. It can be later, but usually it's from your own childhood. Anytime in your childhood when you perceived that you weren't safe or you were in danger, either emotionally or physically. Okay, so we can call these like an emotional wound, perhaps. And basically a trigger, something on the outside of you, the behavior of your child or whoever it is or whatever situation it is, activates this wound or any kind of perceived threat at the time, small or large, that led to a feeling of fear or overwhelm. And then what's happened back then is cortisol was released in your body and actually caused changes to your brain that shaped your future reactions to similar situations. So this is our survival response, our learning response. If something was not so great and was a potentially threatening situation, our body remembers that and stores it. And anything that reminds us of that in the future, it will create a fight, flight, freeze response because it's stored it as something dangerous. Okay, this is how we've survived as humans. So yeah, this is the survival mechanisms, and it makes us more wary of these dangerous situations. So let's have a look at some common parenting triggers that you might recognize. And if you've got any different ones to these, put them in the chat. Or if you've got any of these, I'd like to hear about it in the chat as well. Or you can just say, yeah, that's me, I've got that one. Okay, the thing about emotional triggers is they don't always have to be huge, big traumas, okay? Sometimes they can just be as simple as that you weren't listened to as a child, okay? So here's some very, very common ones. We'll get into the other ones in a minute. So crying. So when your child has, so if, for example, when you were little and you were crying and expressing big emotions as a child and it wasn't tolerated or it was ignored by your parents, now sometimes when you hear your child crying over and over again, it can bring up your own overwhelmed, anxious feelings from your childhood. Okay. Another really common one is when kids talk back or say no. Okay. So this might come, you know, if you're triggered by this, this might be the fact that you weren't allowed an opinion or a voice as a child. So now if you've got a really strong-willed child, when they do that, that actually creates a response, you know, that makes you feel either threatened or angry or frustrated because it's reminding you of a time when you weren't allowed to do that. Another common one is sibling rivalry. So perhaps you weren't allowed to engage in conflict, you know, with a sibling and didn't learn the communication skills needed. So, you know, you can feel quite threatened when your children's fight. You know, if you had a sibling that you used to fight with and that has been stored as a negative memory in your body, in your system, then seeing your own kids fight might be a trigger for you. Physical aggression, again, if one of your children is, you know, is hitting other children or yourself and you were hit by your parents or siblings, this can be stored as a threat response and it triggers your alarm system. Whining is another popular one. If you were kind of a whiny kid and you didn't get what you needed and you didn't get your needs attended to, you might also not be very tolerant of your child's whining. And not listening and being ignored. So if you're a parent who gets upset when their child ignores them or doesn't do what they say, and this is something that you experienced as a child, it can also make you feel insecure, anxious, and not heard. And again, that can create an emotional response. So let me know if any of those resonate in the chat. Let me just see if there's Anybody resonate with any of those? You can pop them in the chat if you like, or if there's any others. I know Walid shared with us that it was when he feels like Leo is pushing his buttons on purpose. It was definitely the on purpose bit, I think, that is definitely worth getting curious about. You know, that might be, you know, something that originated back when you were a child. So triggers don't always have to be big, terrible things that happen to us as a child. Of course, lots of not very great things happen to us as children that could be definitely, you know, regarded as big trauma, as we call it, the big T. But sometimes it's just the little things, and sometimes it's not even the things that happen to us. It's actually sometimes the things that don't happen. So wounds, emotional wounds can occur because of things that happened or didn't happen. And here's some of the most very common ones that can create like emotional wounds within us from our own childhoods. So a feeling of perhaps being misunderstood or unheard, feeling like a general lack of attention, feeling betrayed, feeling unloved, feeling unaccepted, feeling, you know, labeled as difficult. All of these can actually be enough over time if it's kind of consistently all of these things, all of your childhood can actually leave emotional wounds that can act as triggers later. So before we move on, I just want to say, you know, when it comes to how we parent our kids, we're talking very much about how we were parented tonight, but obviously it makes a difference. You might be thinking it from two angles here. What did I receive and what am I giving? Okay, I just want to let you know that you don't have to be perfect all of the time. Okay, there's no such thing as the perfect parent, and you know, you're not always going to be able to make your child feel heard and give them all of the attention that they need. And you know, there'll be times when they feel misunderstood. Okay, I want you to be reassured tonight that you research has actually shown that we only have to get this right, okay, a third of the time. And that our kids are very, very resilient, okay? And for a secure attachment, which we're going to talk about in another class, we're going to go into attachment theory. For a secure attachment, you just have to get this, you know, most of, you know, a third of the time, okay? Just want to make sure that nobody's trying to be perfect at this or feeling bad because they're not like this all of the time with their kids. You know, it's important to remember we're real people, human beings with our own stuff. And you know, it's actually more important for our kids to see us being real rather than perfect. But, you know, obviously this is something we can aspire to and something that we can be aware of, and we can, you know, as much as possible, meet our children's needs whenever we can.
Jasmine, can I ask a question? Just related to like the conscious level of these triggers. Sorry, are my earphones okay? Can this be in your subconscious more than it could be in your like awareness? Do you know what I mean? Like maybe some people can remember these triggers, but I honestly don't really remember it. But maybe it happens at a subconscious level, right? That and also it's perception. Like maybe you were in a very loving family, but just perceived that you weren't for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yeah. And we have to remember that we remember it at the age that we were when we were, like, let's say you were 3 years old, you're remembering it through the perception of a 3-year-old. Okay, which is not going to be the same perception as somebody seeing it from adult. I mean, I have conversations with my mum and she's like, I wasn't that bad, you know, but I have memories of being hit quite a lot. And she's like, I'm sure I didn't do it that many times, but you know, the effects of that behavior on me, you know, as a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, or you know, however old I was quite profound, and would have created, you know, these little kind of wounds here and there. You know, even if it was only 5 times that she did it in my whole lifetime, those were that was stored as a core wound. But to answer your question, yeah, most of this is totally under our conscious awareness.
And at what age do you really remember things? Like, what's the psychological age or cognitive age of memory. I thought it was like 5 or something. I thought children didn't really store long-term memories until they're about 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, it's interesting. So this is what we're going to be getting into more with our one-to-one sessions with the hypnotherapy, because when you are in a different brainwave, when you're in the theta brainwave with hypnosis, you do actually have more access to your subconscious mind, which is where all your memories are stored. So trying to consciously think of a memory doesn't work very well, because we're not actually accessing the rest of our mind. Does that make sense? Remember, 10% of our mind is conscious and 90% is subconscious.
I feel that the older you get, I can't remember a bloody thing right now. It's too old.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes you don't even, you might not have a memory of it, but you just have a feeling about it. Your subconscious, which is basically your mind and body, so it's your whole autonomic nervous system, has stored every single thing that's happened to you since you were conceived onwards. All your time in the womb, your birth, your childhood, everything is stored in your body, ready to keep you safe. And so when we're in hypnosis, we can just access those memories more easily. Sometimes people say, I can't remember anything. And then in hypnosis, they'll remember so much more. So yeah, a lot of this time it's about, I think we're going to be doing this 2 ways. Tonight, we're going to be talking about how to kind of track them and be more aware of them and prevent them on a conscious level. So that's what the trigger tracker and 5-step process is all about. It's much more of a cognitive behavioral therapy approach to being more aware of your triggers and just being more aware that what's fueling them and how to avoid them. Okay, not that it's going to be perfect. You're still going to have hobbit moments every now and again. And the one-to-one hypnotherapy sessions is all about going in and resolving some of these emotional wounds so that they don't hold so much energetic charge, so that they're not so near the surface that they can be pushed. Does that make sense? Yeah, so everything that's happened to you in your life there's a memory of it in your body, and they have different emotional charges. And if there's one that's particularly highly emotionally charged, that's the one that will be, that's where a trigger is. So we're going to be going in your one-to-one sessions and just kind of, allowing those memories to actually be stored in a different way so that they don't bother you so much. Okay, that makes sense? Yeah, it's super powerful. Okay, so
I have to say it sounds slightly terrifying for me personally.
Yes, I know. I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. Okay. So I want to talk to you about the 5 A's of healthy emotional development. This was put together by a guy called David Richo. And these are like the 5 A's of, what your child needs. Okay. And like I said, you're not going to be able to give your child, or you probably didn't receive all of these yourself, a lot of the time. But it's the lack of consistency in these areas that over a long period of time, okay, can lead to, a more like sort of deeper wounds. Okay. So if you don't necessarily, I don't know, give your child the attention that they needed yesterday, okay, but you did the rest of the week, or maybe a third of this week you did, that's not going to be a problem in the long run. Okay, it's when it's over long periods of time that they don't get the attention, affection, acceptance, appreciation, and allowing that they need. Okay, so we can look to our own lives a little bit, our own childhoods, and think about whether or not you received enough of these. Because like I say, it doesn't have to be anything big, like big, huge, something terribly negative that happened to you that only creates emotional wounds. It can be a lack of these things. So a lack of mindful attention, a lack of physical attention and affection, a lack of acceptance for who you were as a child, and were your feelings and interests and choices accepted? Did your caregivers appreciate you and your unique strengths, or were they, really critical of you? Did your parents try to know you and understand you and allow you to share the full range of your emotions? Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of very common examples of the allowing part of this. So some very commonly inherited examples of this when it comes to allowing is when it comes to boys, okay, it's boys crying, okay? So we're probably from generations where, boys aren't really, not every person. Obviously, if you have parents that allowed you to cry, that's great. But it's very common for men and parents and dads that I meet these days to find it very hard to tolerate crying in their kids, especially their toddlers. So if you, as a boy, weren't allowed to cry and you were told to man up, or it was ignored, or you were told boys don't cry, there's this real sense of repressing all of that. And then when we hear our own child crying, or when you hear your own child crying, that can be unbearable, because it triggers those repressed emotions about how you were not allowed to do that as a child. And that can come up as irritation or impatientness, or just that annoying feeling that can also be, you can end up being quite angry about it. And the one for women is anger. So as girls, it's not tolerated, for girls to be angry. We're meant to be good and quiet. We're not supposed to be unruly and angry. And if we weren't allowed to express our anger as a little girl, and we repressed that and we pushed it all down, that is what is there stored in our body. So when your daughter especially is quite angry and unruly, that can trigger you and make you feel angry and annoyed as well. Okay, so that's just a couple of examples. Okay, so we're going to talk about preventing triggers, and then we're going to talk about the power of your thoughts, and then we're going to look at the 5 steps to preventing or transforming your triggers. It's not about thinking of your triggers as something terrible and wrong. It's about actually using your triggers for personal transformation, because actually what our children are bringing to us is a mirror. And it's like they're holding up a mirror and showing us where we've got areas where we could do our own healing and, be more of the person that we were meant to be. Okay, so we can look at triggers as gifts. We can look at our children as gifts, because they're showing us where we can do that healing for ourselves. So preventing triggers, this is really about the self-care stuff. Obviously, if your volcano is already fairly full because you haven't slept properly, you've not eaten, you've not had some space, you've not exercised, you haven't taken care of yourself, your volcano is already here. Okay, so when your child does the behavior that triggers you, it's not going to take long for your volcano to erupt. So one of the best things we can do for ourselves to be able to tolerate these behaviors that trigger us for longer and not let them bother us so much is to make sure that our volcano is emptied, our emotional backpack is empty, and that we're a more neutral space for when our child does that behavior. You all know this, right? If you're having a good day and you're well rested and everything in life is good, the behavior that bothered you last week might not bother you so much, or you can tolerate it for longer. Yes, that makes sense? Yeah. So I always come back to this. One of the best things you can do is, make sure that you are taken care of so that you can be less triggerable. Okay. And then we can look at your thoughts. And this is getting it at the kind of perception stage, okay? Because it's our thoughts about the behavior, okay, that actually create the response. Okay, so this is where we can be really curious about what is going on in our mind that is making us perceive it as a threat, or what is the story that we're allowing this behavior to generate. Okay, so you're probably aware of this cycle, right? The role of your thoughts in your life. When you have a thought from an external stimulus, so something's happening, your child is pushing your buttons and doing the thing that makes you go mad, your thinking mind lights up first. Okay, then your emotional brain is activated from the thought that you have, and then from the feeling you take action, you make choices, and you take actions based on this thought feeling sequence. Okay, and then the way you act affects your environment and the situation, and in turn your thought patterns will follow that. Okay, so it's a cycle, it goes around and around and around. So yeah, so it's really about the story that we tell ourselves when our child is doing something. And these thoughts are really sneaky, and they're happening sometimes below your conscious awareness because they are automatic responses. Okay, so they're always going on behind the scenes, and it's really worth taking a closer look at your thoughts and your beliefs when it comes to understanding your unique patterns of reactivity for your child, to your child. So this is one of the steps, and I'm going to go through the 5 steps, but this is just one of the steps I wanted to bring to your attention. So one of the things you can do to interrupt the reactive cycle that you find yourself in when your child is triggering you is to ask yourself these questions. Now, if you can do them in the moment, amazing. Okay, but sometimes, that's not always possible to do. So if you have the time to do it in the moment, great. If you don't, it's worth, after the event, reflecting back and asking yourself these questions, because what you're doing there is you're just bringing more awareness and more attention to them. So you can ask yourself, is it true? What evidence do I have that this thought is true? And I'm going to go through some examples in a second. You can ask yourself, is it relevant? Okay, is this thought relevant to this situation, or is this coming from my past? So it's, again, just getting more aware and knowing yourself better, and just being more aware of those automatic thought processes. You can ask yourself, is it helpful? Is this thought helping me in this situation, or is this thought actually fueling my reactivity? Okay, this is where you get to choose. So again, sometimes this takes that pause. That's why we've been practicing the power pause so often, because this is going to take a little bit of pausing to actually apply some of these questions. You can ask yourself, does it align with my parenting values? Is this how I really want to be? Is this how I want to speak to my child? Is this what I want to do? What cognitive distortions am I using? Okay, so there's very common cognitive distortions, and if you ever hear yourself saying should, or never, or always, or what if, those are signs that you're using something called a cognitive distortion, which is actually very limiting when it comes to your responses. Okay, so that you can look out for those, and asking yourself, even if you just ask this one question, you could just ask yourself, what's a more balanced and higher truth here? Or my other favorite question to ask myself sometimes, if I can just do it in a minute, is, what would love do here? So if I find myself reacting negatively to something, I will ask myself that question and just think, okay, even though I'm full of all this stuff right now, what is the loving response here? And you can catch your thoughts. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. But it is a way, you are retraining your brain to think differently and act differently. But you can take control of your thoughts by catching them and then reversing them. So this is what we've been doing a little bit with the mantras. You can turn an unhelpful thought into a more helpful thought, into a more loving, into a more accepting, into a more positive, helpful thought that is going to then change the reaction into a more loving, responsive reaction or response. So here's some examples. So has anyone ever thought, oh my God, my child is a spoiled brat? Maybe sometimes when they're trying to get their own way, or, you know, you may or may not have this one, but I've definitely spoken to parents who, you know, might have this thought going on in their head. This is an example of catastrophizing. So really kind of over exaggerating, you know, maybe they didn't share a toy or something with their friend that day. And what you've done is created this big catastrophe about how my child is a spoiled brat. Okay. So the helpful version of that is, you know, maybe my child is actually acting appropriately for her age, you know, because sharing isn't something that our children are able to do naturally for a lot longer than we think. Okay, so sharing is not something that you could expect a 2-year-old to do. We can talk. There's another module on sharing, so we'll talk about that a bit more. But it's about, you know, recognizing that that's quite an over-exaggerated response for your child not sharing. Okay, and so it's the story you tell yourself that makes a difference to how you respond. Am I making sense? Just put a thumbs up if you're with me. Yeah, everyone with me? Carol, are you with me? Yeah, good. So another one, I can't do anything right. You know, as a parent, sometimes we give ourselves a really hard time when we're like, oh my God, I can't do anything right with this child. Okay, again, it's like overgeneralizing. You know, the truth is there's actually loads of things you'll do right and that you do well. Okay, so just changing that thought can change the way that you feel, and therefore will change your response. Polarized thinking is another common one. We're terrible parents. But the opposite, more helpful thought is there are many things that we do really well as parents. Or this one's from my own life. You know, sometimes when I'm in the pits of despair, sometimes, or I have been, not so much now, I'll be thinking, oh my God, he's going to struggle all of his life. You know, what's his future going to look like? Will he ever be able to have a job? Will he be able to, you know, all of this kind of fear, and jumping to conclusions that he's going to have a terrible life and he's going to struggle. Okay, that's not helpful for me in the moment. So I would maybe swap that into, I can't predict the future and it doesn't help now if I stress about it. Okay, and just that little tweak can make me go, oh, okay, you know, and move out of the fear response into a more loving approach, or a more accepting approach to when things are really what I think is completely dire and the end of the world, and then, you know, changing it into like, no, it's going to be okay. It's literally coming out of the stress response and going into the, you know, the relaxations response, or the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So these two things are, you know, taking control of your thoughts is one of the steps on the 5 steps. And if you're curious, this is an extra thing you can do, but I've written a little guide to this topic on the 12 most common thought distortions or cognitive distortions that you can read about. Have you come across those before? Maybe some of you have come across that before. And you can look at them and try and identify which ones you tend to do. It's super interesting what our thoughts are, our thought patterns, and how they're affecting our lives. So if you've got the time, it's really worth reading that. So let's go through the 5 steps. Now, I know this looks like a lot, and this is all on a trigger tracker.
Sorry, it's me again. Sorry for asking questions. I don't really understand the cognitive distortion thing.
So we have ways of thinking. It's best to think of it like that. So I'll give you an example. My tendency is to think in very black and white terms. So I come in an all or nothing person when it comes to the way that I think about everything in my life. And that's very limiting for me. So, you know, my focus is trying to find the gray area and not be so stuck on, well, if it's, you know, I'm going to be all or not. It's very all or nothing kind of personality trait of mine, which is generated from this kind of way of thinking. So cognitive basically means ways of thinking, patterns of thinking. And those have been a part of my personality for, you know, a very long time, that I would have maybe had some genetic disposition too, but it's also about your upbringing and how, you know, how those ways of thinking would have been ways for you to survive and get by in earlier life. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of. But the use of same and never and things like that, how would that demonstrate that you think like that?
Yeah, so if you're always saying like should is one, if you're always saying I should do this and I should do that, it just
Like
doesn't.
lack of commitment or something.
It should actually is about this feeling like there's all these rules that you have to kind of stick to, and it's very limiting on you because there's always it's very typical one of perfectionists. It should look like this, I should be like this, you know.
No, I get it. Yeah,
there's a lot of kind of shoulds going on.
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of internal pressure.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. The guide's got a bit more information about it. So
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So yeah, the 5-step framework. So I've got this in an actual tracker that you can print off, but I'm going to go through the steps. Okay. I say this is a very cognitive behavior approach to looking at your thought processes and your triggers. And in the one-to-ones, if you want to, we can go with a more energetic approach to things as well. It's useful to have both, or you know, you can use either one depending on what you're more comfortable with. Okay, so here's the steps. So step 1 is about tracking your triggers. So this is all about, whenever you can, zooming out and being reflective about what is triggering you. Okay. So maybe at the end of a day, or maybe at the end of the week, you know, you wouldn't be expected to do all of these 5 steps in the moment. Okay. In the moment, if your child is triggering you, your job is really just to do the 3 ends and to, you know, notice it and name it and nurture yourself through it. And that's where the power pause comes in, and any of the self-regulation tools. Okay, this is a more kind of like, let's reflect on this. So, you know, maybe you could even think about yesterday or any day from the past week, and you can ask yourself, what was the trigger? Okay, so you can think of a time when you were triggered. Okay, was it a comment, an action, a facial expression? Was it the way your child said no? Was it that they were being defiant? You know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about your children. If you haven't got any for your children, you can, you know, think about the last time you were triggered by anybody or any situation and use this trigger tracker. So you say you write down what the trigger is, okay, and then you try and identify the thought that you had straight after it. Okay, could it be something like, I can't handle this, oh my god, my kid's driving me mad, I'm a terrible parent, she's challenging my authority, you know, why are they giving me such a hard time? And to also recognize what you felt in your body as well, because when you do this, it's going to help you to recognize it quicker next time. Okay, so this is a reflective exercise, but if you can do it, you are bringing in more awareness of it into your conscious mind, so it doesn't become, so it's not so automatic and subconscious reactions. Okay, and then after you've written down what you felt, you can, you know, write what you did. Okay, and the first few times you did this reflectively, you know, you might end up saying, you know, oh, my child was doing this, I felt like I wanted to hit them, I thought, oh my god, my child is driving me crazy, and then I yelled at them, or I stormed out of the room, or I burst out crying. Oh, my favorite one, I stuffed my face with chocolate in the fridge. You know, like whatever it is that you did, you know, what did you do when you were triggered? Okay, so tracking your triggers first of all, then you can dig deeper. And again, it's really important to remove any judgment here from your analysis. You're just looking for the story, you know, that was going on. So you ask yourself, you know, why might have I reacted this way? Why is my brain perceiving this behavior as unsafe? Does this remind me of an earlier life experience? You know, if I talk back to my parents I was physically punished. So it don't make sense that when my child talks back to me, I get really stressed and upset because I've stored that in my body as, a dangerous situation. And that's why I, go into the stress response. Ask yourself, when did I encounter a similar situation in my own childhood? Was I threatened, yelled, punished, spanked, ignored? What was the unmet need in me that needed to be healed or needs to be healed? Did I need to be seen or heard or validated, or did I just feel misunderstood? What A's were missing from my childhood? Did I need more love and compassion? Okay. And it's really important to see this through the eyes of you as the child that you were at the time, not the adult you are today going, yeah, but my parents did their best and they did. And yeah, it wasn't that bad. Okay. Because remember, it's stored in your body, not as the adult you are today, it's stored as the child you were back then. And that would have felt like, the end of the world if you didn't have the connection that you needed at that time, if you didn't get your needs met. Okay, so it's really important to look at it through the eyes of you as a child. After digging deeper, that's when you ask yourself those 6 questions. We've talked about them already, so you can track your triggers, dig deeper, ask yourself some more questions around it, and challenge your thoughts. And then step 4 is to celebrate any single thing that you managed to do well, okay, better than last time that you encountered the situation or last time you lost it. Okay, this is about recognizing that you caught it a little bit earlier, or you tolerated it a little bit longer, or that you nurtured yourself and actually you were able to do the power pause and breathe, and actually it really helped. And to evaluate what worked, what didn't, to bring more attention to what the unmet need was within yourself and how you met it, and how you get to celebrate that. Sometimes it's just doing a little dance, sometimes it's whatever you want to do, but it's really important to celebrate each little win, okay, because that will make that pathway more trodden, so that over time that will be your response. These new responses that you're literally training your brain to do, that will be your new response. Okay, but this does take time. Okay, and it's about continual effort. It's a journey, and it's not about perfection, it's about progress, even the tiny little ones. Okay. And then step 5 is writing a plan for next time. So, okay, that went well, or that didn't go so well. I still ended up going to the fridge and stuffing my face full of chocolate, and I really don't want to do that. So, what do I want to do next time? What can I do to catch it quicker? What mantra will I have ready? Okay, to counteract the thought that I know I have when my child does that. Maybe if they are saying no all the time and that's the thing that bothers you, you can actually say, do you know what, they're not saying no to me personally, they're just saying no to the request, and they're allowed to do that. That's their job as a toddler. Okay, so this is about taking it's about not taking it personally. That's what this is about. Not taking the behavior you see in front of you personally. It's understandable why we do, but this is where we get to choose to do something different from our automatic conditioning and programming. One of the tips I shared in the WhatsApp group this week was the rubber band method. That's a really great way to, if you can't always mentally think of, all of this stuff, sometimes you can just use the rubber band. I still haven't got a rubber band. I usually have one on my wrist the whole time. You can just snap a rubber band on your wrist to give you the physical reminder to pause, do your power pause, and then choose a better thought, choose a different, more loving response, even if that's choosing to walk out for a few moments. Okay, or write post-it notes around the room, or write it on your hand, or put it on your phone. and think about what preventative tools you can use more of. So if you notice yourself always, having your buttons pushed and always being reactive, again, going back to your self-care plan and your schedule and working out where you can make more space and time for yourself. Okay. And then you kind of just keep going with this. So this is a great exercise to do weekly, or, however many times you want to do it. If you just do it, maybe you just do it once you've had a particularly difficult situation with your child and you can take yourself through this tracker. Or maybe you want to put it in your diary as a once a week thing and, list all of the things that happen that week. And, over time, when you continually do this, you will notice an improvement and you will be making those new neural pathways in your own minds to make that loving response your go-to response instead of your reactive trigger response. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions in a second. So there are some mantras on the site that might be helpful to you. Again, if you want to use a mantra from previous classes, but here's 3 new ones that you can bring into your mantra repertoire. It's worth trying them all out at least a couple of times just to see what really is the medicine that makes you go, what is the thought that is most helpful for you? So another really great, powerful one is this too shall pass. Sometimes when I remember my kids would, I was really struggling with my kids, I used to think, oh my God, I'm going to be like doing this forever. Sometimes in those moments, you just feel like, oh my God, I just feel like I'm always doing this. And this is always going to be a problem. Okay. But I can promise you when they get to like 13 and 16, they're not going to be doing the same things that trigger you. It's actually really interesting. The psychologists actually, they say that your child will trigger you at the age you were when you were struggling with that thing. Okay, so it's always, if your child is 3 and you've got emotional wounds when you were 3, that's when you will feel them. Okay, when my daughter was 13, she was, definitely doing things that reminded me of myself when I was 13, and all my stuff from being 13 came up. And what a lovely opportunity it was to deal with that shit. Right. So yeah, it's interesting to know that however old your child is, that's usually where the wound is in your system. So yeah, this too shall pass. Another curious question, more than a mantra, but you can ask yourself, I wonder what this feeling is trying to show me. I wonder wonder what this wound is that my child is mirroring to me right now. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to heal from my past. So there's some really powerful reframes in there about your child's behavior and using them as a way to actually reparent yourself. Opportunities to reparent yourself through your own childhood wounds. There is, this isn't new, but if you haven't found this one already, I definitely recommend trying this out. I've put it again into this topic because I think this topic really requires a lot of self-compassion. Okay, so if you haven't found the audio guide for the self-compassion break, I really recommend going to find that and listening to that, as it will, again, it's like a healing balm on your nervous system and it's especially good for perfectionists who just want to get things right all of the time. This is about self-acceptance and realizing that we're human and that we're doing our best. And yeah, it's important to give ourselves that self-love and compassion, especially if we are looking at our own childhood wounds. The meditation this week is called Transforming Your Triggers, and this is a recorded version of what I normally do in a one-to-one hypnotherapy session with a client who is doing inner child healing. Okay, so if I've put a description of it, and I've also said that if there's any particular big T's, big trauma wounds in your childhood, it's best not to listen to this and to do it with a trained professional like I am. So that is something we can do in our one-to-ones. But I wanted to record this and give that to you as a tool for when there are no more one-to-ones, or, later on in life when you want to do that, or, or if you feel like you want to do that every week, you can do that rather than just wait for a one-to-one with me. The journaling prompts are great because they're going to help you ask questions that will help identify which of those A's you may or may not have received enough of, and just to, again, just be clearer and more aware of your own triggers. The resources are mainly this guide to taking control of your thoughts. So it's got the 12 most common cognitive distortions or ways of thinking, patterns of thinking that hold you back, that limit you, that create these stories that make you more reactive. So feel free to have a look at that and try and identify which one you do, because once you've identified it, you will catch yourself quicker next time when you're doing it. And this is going to affect all areas of your life, not just parenting, by the way. Like I said, I'm not going to give you any new self-regulation tools, okay, but I do want you this week to use the ones that we've already covered. So that's the cross crawl, the one where we do this, the salamander, it's called, and the power pause. Those would be, I really want you to practice them more so that they become more integrated and embedded in your life, and more like second nature to be dealing with these situations. So I'm not going to add another one. So this week's practice is trying out the 5 steps, the framework, reading that guide and listening to the mantras, etc. I won't go over it again, and sharing your takeaways and intentions and your wins and challenges. And there is a class next week, but next week is our integration class. Okay, so there's no new topics next week. It's really about looking at the last 3 weeks' topics and having more questions, answers, discussions, and really helping to make more sense of them so that they become a part of your life before we move on to the next module. Okay, and I'll just leave you with this little quote and then I'll open it up to questions. So this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's about recognizing that when we unpack our stuff and we get to unpack our baggage, which we're in a much better position to than our own parents. Our parents did the best that they could with the resources, knowledge and skills and tools that they had, right? But as parents ourselves now, we get the chance to just kind of unload as much of that stuff that we were given, so that we don't pass that on to our children. So when people talk about breaking cycles and generational trauma, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about, saying, actually, I'm going to carry on with all the good stuff I got given in my childhood, but actually I'm going to be a bit more picky and a bit more choosy, more conscious about what I want my child to receive from me, that I didn't get or did get too much of when I was a child. All right, I hope that all makes sense. It's quite a deep topic. I'm going to close that down and see if you have any questions or comments or takeaways or reflections or feelings. And if you don't, that's okay too. How does that land? Is that something that feels empowering or heavy or scary or overwhelming, or what does it feel like?
It seems a bit deep.
Yeah, I was about to say the same, a lot of things to reflect
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
I think at the moment it's more useful for my life outside and beyond.
Yeah.
My daughter.
Parenting.
we're at, like when the other guys are expressing a lot of experiences we haven't got to yet, just because Mariana's so young.
Yeah.
So right now, a lot of the triggers probably happen outside the actual parent job.
Yeah, you can definitely
Not
use
necessarily with my wife, other spheres of my life.
yeah. Well, our parents can trigger us as well. You know, if you're with your own parents, I had a big one with my mom actually over the summer, and we've done a lot of work on our relationship, but she did something that absolutely threw me, and I totally reacted. I was like, yeah, my husband said he could hear me down the road. It was that bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm.
And she did something, and it was a complete, what it was for me, what it felt like for me was that I didn't matter. So I went storming on for a walk and was crying, and like, oh, I was just so full of the emotions of what I might have felt back then. And luckily I've got these tools, because I reparented myself and I spoke to my inner child, and I was able to be there as an adult and give her the love and attention and reassurance that she needed. And that's something that, once you experience that in our one-to-ones, that's something you can then do for yourself. So it's not always our kids that will trigger a wound. Yeah, and after dealing with it, I was actually really grateful and really thankful to the universe and my mom for sending me that, because it actually totally changed how I then did other things in my life, just by going to that place where my little girl didn't feel like she mattered, and what she said didn't matter, and what she did, like there was a real sense of loss and lack of mattering, which is pretty deep, I know. But after I let go of that, and then what came out of it for me, just to give you an example of how deep this can go, what came out of it for me was the decision and change in my belief that I needed my mom to make me feel like I mattered. So I decided that day that I wasn't going to rely on my mum to make me feel like I mattered or not, because she wasn't always up to it. She wasn't always able. And that actually like disentangled me from needing her to give me that sense of mattering. And now I give it to myself. I'm totally reliant on myself for that, rather than needing my mom to do that. And actually that's improved our relationship no end, because now I don't get upset when she doesn't meet my needs. Because I don't need her to make me feel like I matter anymore. It's so powerful, right? These tools are, those triggers are like, if you can come at it from a place of awareness and curiosity and go to those places, you will find that there's some really deep beliefs that you decided to create as a child that may not be serving you as anymore in your life. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to share like so openly, but I'm hoping that.
No, but that's great and very brave, by the way. I think all of us, we carry those things, and they also inform some of our decisions, our attitudes to adult situations, the way we interact with colleagues at work, we react to professional or personal situation. I think we just don't maybe give it so much, importance that it comes from our inner child experiences.
Yeah, it's all there. Everything we are today is based on the first 7 years of our life. And so as parents, that's why it's so important to be more aware of this stuff, because you get now a chance to, even though you're not being triggered by Mariana, you now get a chance to be more aware of it when it does happen. And you'd be like, I know what's happening here. Oh, that's really interesting. Let's go and look at what that's about. Oh, okay, you can trace it back, and then you can, decide what you want to do with that. And that can be a very conscious thing, or, you might want some other healing work on some of those things as well.
Yeah. Just from a male perspective, obviously I'm not a man, but if you spent your whole if you spent your whole life with someone telling you not to cry and not to show emotion and not to, then how does it work being sat in a course like this with you trying to unravel things that happened in someone's childhood when they can't even tell someone they love them, or they're not allowed to tell their friends they love them? Or how does that operate? Because if my husband was here right now, whilst I'm massively on board with everything that you say, I don't think Clem would. I mean, he would just think it's, you know, rubbish, to be quite honest, because that he's so alpha male that he can't accept that there would be anything like this that could have such a huge impact in his future life, that would be so connected to his past life, if you understand what I'm saying. So how does that work? Because he's completely not attached or not aware, or we just won't allow himself to be emotionally open or open to this kind of thing. He'd just be like, oh, it's all, no, it's not how men behave. It's not what they talk about. It's not how they do things. We're not trained like this. So I don't know if there's is there any tools or techniques to try and make someone a bit more aware of it, or just conversations, enlightenment?
I think I've got to the point where I recognize everyone's on their own journey and everyone's at a different stage of it. And leading by example is probably one of the biggest, most powerful ways I've updated and changed, and educated my husband about things. So, that example I just gave you with my mom, all he saw on the outside was just like me blowing my top in the kitchen. And, I literally just turned into my teenage self, which was not pretty, I can tell you that much. And he was like, what the hell went on? And I talked him through what it meant, what it did. And he's very much like, what the, like when I first started talking to him about this stuff, he was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, he's so, I don't want to use the word simple, but we could use the word uncomplicated. So the depths of this stuff would be like whoosh over his head. But he's been, and definitely to begin with, he was like, not talking rubbish, but he was just like, don't know what you're talking about kind of thing. And over time, he's definitely seen changes in me. So I think it was really about, leading by example and articulating it where you can without trying to look like you're trying to change him.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody ever wants to be changed until they're ready to change. And I do think that life will give him opportunities to go there when he's ready. Sometimes life has to give us something really big if we're not willing to go there by ourselves. So it might be something, it could be a job loss, or it could be a health issue, that will, encourage him or make him look at this stuff. But everyone has to do it when they're ready, at their own pace and in their own way. But these are the things that are driving our lives, and I don't know if that's answered your question.
Yeah, it has. Thank you.
Can I just reconfirm what Jasmine said? I think, I think he has to be ready. That's the key, I think. I can tell you from my side, it's so, I come from a culture where it's like, honor, alpha male type of environment, if you want. And I can tell you what, 10, 15 years ago, there's no way I would be doing a course like that. But then obviously things change, and then, you get married, you want to get kids, you want to be the best version of yourself for your kids. So I guess, there's no right timing for it, I guess. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it was, you kind of, well, at least for me, there was a major shift as soon as we even found out that I was pregnant. It was, everything changed. It was like a click that I'm not living for myself anymore. I'm not, okay, obviously we're living together, it's you're no longer bachelor, but then you get married, so you're automatically shifting. But then when kids get involved, it's like, for me, it was complete massive shift. So I guess the ego kind of disappears, or it has to, if you want the best for the child or the children. It's and I'm just blabbering, but I hope it's makes sense in some way.
Definitely.
It makes sense to me. Yeah, yeah, I completely get it.
Yeah.
My husband's
Well,
10
it
years
might
younger
not
than me,
make
so
sense to your husband yet.
I was about
Yeah.
to say, but of course, this was a very serious thing you shared with all of us. So I didn't want. Sometimes I come with like funny light jokes, but I remember a movie where a woman was trying to get deep secrets from her husband while he was asleep. So she was with this clock next to his head to hypnotize him and asking questions he was answering in his sleep. So I was thinking maybe you can program some ideas, watch Jasmine's course. No, sorry. But this came to my mind when you said how you can basically make him maybe change. So sorry, this was.
Maybe
just.
system.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to tell you something that is a bit unrelated, but just talk about the subconscious mind. So, and I'm not saying this for any reason, but my which is deeply sad, but just to tell you this story, my cousin actually drowned in a pool when he was 3. And when we had a pool built in our villa in Dubai, which is very nice. But when we started the work, I started to, in my sleep, actually start having like dreaming that my daughter was drowning, that all these horrible things were happening, and have night terrors, which I've never had in my life before.
Wow.
And literally, my poor husband, because it was happening every night or every other night, and I would be physically playing everything that I felt in my dream on him. So trying to save my daughter, I dreamt that she was getting shot, was like padding him, and all sorts. I was like sleepwalking, screaming, turning on lights, very, very controlled emotionally, and all in my sleep. And this was all around the pool was being built. And then it was, at the time I was having acupuncture, and she said to me, it's because you're so controlled, you're so emotionally controlled, and you just push everything down, that in your sleep, you can't control it anymore. So all your anxiety with, my poor cousin that drowned in this pool, with so many people there, who all thought they were watching him, was coming out in my sleep. So I kind of see, I know that's quite a horrific example, sorry to share, but it shows you the power of these things that you've not dealt with, because I clearly hadn't dealt with it, and it was just coming. And then we complete the pool. It's all done. It's got like a bolt fortress around it. Or never ever happened again. I don't have those night terrors anymore. So I think is the perfect example of what can happen if you haven't dealt with this shit.
Yeah, it's a really sad but very powerful example of a trigger. Like the pool being built reminded your subconscious of an experience that you either witnessed or experienced secondhand through people talking about it, and all of the trauma that those people went through, and you all absorb that trauma, and that's stored in your body, and then the trigger comes, remind you of it, and then your dreams,
and if you don't deal with it, it just come out in sleep.
Your dreams are trying to process things. That's what dreams do. They process all your subconscious stuff. And I have like 3 to 4 nightmares a week, so I'm still working through some pretty big shit, I think. But, I'll tell you about that's another story. But that's how the world works. That's how our lives work. It's all, but we're operating on this kind of surface level where we don't understand why we think like we do or why we react like we do. We're just at the mercy of life. Whereas this gives us an opportunity to identify why we think like we think, why we do what we do, and change it for the better of ourselves, better of our children, for the better of the world. I don't, it's a big mission that I've got, but I really do believe changing the way we parent is going to change the way that our children think, feel, and operate in the world, and definitely can change the world for the better. So thank you for sharing.
Talking of, yeah, sorry, talking of nightmares, we recently started experiencing Mariana having nightmares. I know I read long time ago that it's normal for kids, but I was just wondering what is making her, like cry in her sleep. I mean, we don't do anything really to traumatize her, but yeah, it always crosses my mind. What is, our daughter dreaming about it, because she cries in her sleep sometimes.
How often?
Once or twice a week.
Wow.
Again, it's just like processing her day. It could just be something really little that seems little to us, but it's quite a big thing for a 1-year-old. And remember, this isn't about trying to make their lives perfect so they don't have any trauma, because that's not realistic, and then they don't get the opportunity to build resilience. Okay, but what we can do is we can teach them, the tools to be able to cope with those things. And obviously, the more we are able to cope with those things, the more we're role modeling that for them, and the more available we are for them. When we get into the next module, one of the things I'll be talking about is sleep hypnosis for kids. I have a really beautiful script that you can use with your kids while they're going to sleep, which helps them to process anything that's happened that day that might have been a little bit scary, or a little bit worrying, or a little bit creating anxiety. So yeah, it's a really beautiful little script for that.
Does that's probably going to go on top of her personal massage she gets every night.
Yeah, nice.
I worked out accidentally. She used to stay up, walking around on the bed and jumping up and down for probably about half an hour to an hour every night. And I would just stay watching. I try to pick her up, put her down. She'd get up and down, up and down. That's why she learned to walk so quickly. And then one day, just by accident, I started rubbing her back. And now, this has been going on now for 4 months. I rub her back to get her to sleep every night. She gets a bloody personal massage every night, our daughter. But she goes to sleep straight away. I don't know when I'm going to be able to stop it.
Never.
That's the rule.
I still rub my daughter's tummy every night when I put her to bed. It's not like an hour long anymore, but it's something that makes her connected. And I wouldn't think of it as spoiling her, because the tone that you said it in was a little bit like, she gets a massage. Like, yeah, she gets a massage. Like, amazing. You get connection time. You regulate her nervous system.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
exactly. Don't think of it as a bad thing at all. And add all of that stuff. Yeah. So Carol, would you like to say anything? Any thoughts or takeaways before we leave?
No, today I'm okay. Today I'm very sleepy.
Okay, lovely. I'm going to see you on Friday. So
yes.
So I look forward to seeing you then. And we can talk a bit more about anything that's come up from today, or anything that pops up. You guys might have things popping up over the next couple of days as you process the information that you received tonight as well. So again, write things down, journal them, talk about them in your couples. That's great as well, to make more sense of them and to integrate them. Luba, do you want to say anything? I know you missed the beginning, but the replay will be around.
Yeah, sorry, Leo, I think had a very big day of processing.
Yeah.
So the dinner, he loves to eat, and it was like his favorite soup, and just no to food, no to everything. And just it escalated quite quickly. No shower, wanting to do everything himself, and it just took forever to put him to bed. So it was a very difficult evening.
Yeah. All right, well, go and take care of yourself.
Thanks.
And like I say, any other conversation note pieces or questions or discussion, please feel free to contact me one-to-one if you prefer to do that on WhatsApp, or in the Facebook group if you're happy to share with the group, so we can all share and learn from each other. Everyone take care of yourselves, and remember the self-compassion break this week, because it is quite a topic. All right. I will see you next Wednesday.
Bye, everybody.
Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.